Welcome to Lesson 4.7 of the Grant Architect course, where we move from describing your program to explaining why your program actually works. In this lesson, we explore the theory of change, the causal hypothesis that explains why your program produces the outcomes you claim it achieves. While a logic model shows what happens in your program, including inputs, activities, outputs, and outcomes, a theory of change explains why it happens and what causal mechanisms connect your activities to the changes you expect to see in participants' lives. Understanding and articulating your theory of change strengthens your proposal significantly because it demonstrates thoughtful program design based on evidence rather than wishful thinking. By the end of this lesson, you will understand how to articulate the causal mechanisms underlying your program, distinguish clearly between logic models and theories of change, and strengthen your proposal by making your program theory explicit and evidence-based. A theory of change is an explanation of why and how program activities produce the outcomes you expect to achieve. It articulates the causal mechanisms that connect your program to its intended results by explaining the process through which change occurs. Different funders and fields may call this concept program theory, change theory, intervention theory, or causal model, but the underlying concept is similar across these different terms. The function of a theory of change is to make causal assumptions explicit and open to examination. Every program embeds assumptions about how change happens in the world, whether those assumptions are stated or unstated. Theory of change surfaces these underlying assumptions so they can be examined critically, tested through evaluation, and communicated clearly to funders and stakeholders. The relationship between theory of change and logic models is complementary rather than competitive. If a logic model shows what happens in your program, including the sequence of components, the theory of change explains why it happens and what causal process connects activities to outcomes. Logic models show the components and flow visually. Theory of change explains the causal logic connecting those components and provides the reasoning that justifies your program design. Understanding the distinction between logic models and theories of change is important for effective proposal development. Logic models describe the what, showing components and their sequence in a visual format. They answer questions about what resources you have available, what activities you conduct with those resources, and what outputs and outcomes result from those activities. The focus is on describing the program structure clearly. Theory of change explains the why, articulating the causal mechanisms that make your program work. It answers questions about why these specific activities produce these specific outcomes and what causal process connects your intervention to the changes you seek. The focus is on explaining causation rather than just describing sequence. Logic models provide visual representation of program structure in a standardized format. They show boxes and arrows depicting flow from inputs through activities and outputs to outcomes. The emphasis is on clear visual communication that allows readers to quickly understand your program design. Theory of change provides narrative explanation of how change actually occurs in the real world. It tells the story of why your program works and what happens in participants' lives that produces improvement. The emphasis is on explanatory power and plausibility of your causal claims. Theories of change often use an if-then structure that makes causal claims clear and testable. The basic form states if we do X, then Y will result as a consequence. This simple structure makes causal claims explicit and open to scrutiny. For example, if we provide job training, then participants will gain employment skills they can use in the workplace. Chain logic extends this reasoning through multiple sequential steps that build on each other. If X, then Y. If Y, then Z. If Z, then the ultimate outcome. If we provide training, then participants gain skills. If they gain skills, then they can compete effectively for jobs. If they compete effectively, then they gain employment. Each link in the chain must hold for the overall theory to work. Conditional statements make causal claims explicit and open to critical examination by reviewers and evaluators. Each if-then statement can and should be questioned. Is the relationship real and supported by evidence? Is it strong enough to produce meaningful change? Are there conditions that must be present for the relationship to hold? Testable propositions can be evaluated for validity through research and evaluation. Studies can examine whether the proposed causal relationships actually hold in practice with your population. Evidence-based programs have tested their theories of change empirically and demonstrated that the proposed mechanisms actually operate as theorized. Comprehensive theories of change include several essential components that work together to explain how your program creates change. Target population identifies who experiences the problem and who will receive your intervention. Understanding your population is essential for designing appropriate interventions and setting realistic expectations about what outcomes are achievable. Different populations may respond differently to the same intervention. Problem analysis reflects your understanding of why the problem exists in the first place. Root causes, contributing factors, and conditions that maintain the problem over time should inform your intervention design. Your theory of change should address the actual causes of the problem rather than just its symptoms. If you do not address root causes, change may not persist. Change mechanisms explain how your intervention actually produces change in participants' lives. What happens during and after participation that leads to the outcomes you expect? What process transforms program activities into meaningful improvements? This is the core of your theory and distinguishes thoughtful programs from wishful thinking. Enabling conditions identify what must be true for change to occur as your theory predicts. Are there prerequisites for your program to work as intended? Participant motivation, family support systems, community resources, or environmental factors may be necessary conditions without which your program cannot succeed. Program theories draw from multiple valuable sources that should be considered during design. Research literature provides evidence about what works and why in programs similar to yours. Academic studies, program evaluations, and systematic reviews offer insights into effective approaches and their underlying mechanisms. Using research increases your credibility with reviewers. Professional knowledge contributes practitioner expertise and experience from frontline staff. Staff who have worked in the field for years understand how change actually happens in practice with real participants. Their tacit knowledge, gained through direct observation of what works and what does not, informs theory development in ways research cannot capture. Participant input provides understanding from those actually experiencing the problem your program addresses. People living with the issue know what helps and what barriers exist. Their perspective enriches program theory and increases the likelihood your intervention will be accepted and effective. Existing models offer established program theories and frameworks you can adapt. Evidence-based programs come with articulated theories of change. Established frameworks like social learning theory, the trans-theoretical model, or motivational interviewing provide theoretical grounding that reviewers will recognize. Evidence-based theories of change have strong foundations. Empirical support means research demonstrates the proposed relationships actually work. Studies show that the intervention produces the claimed outcomes through the proposed mechanisms. Replication means the theory has been tested across multiple settings and populations. One study might be a fluke. Multiple studies showing consistent results strengthen confidence in the theory. Mechanism understanding means we know why relationships exist, not just that they exist. We understand the process by which the intervention produces change, not just the correlation between them. Boundary conditions identify when the theory applies and when it does not. All theories have limits. Knowing when your approach works and when it may not work helps with appropriate application. Articulating your theory of change follows a logical process. Start with outcomes by identifying what change you seek to create. What is the ultimate improvement you want to see in participants' lives? Begin with the end in mind. Work backward by asking what must happen for that change to occur. What intermediate changes are necessary? What must participants do, learn, or experience before the ultimate outcome can happen? Identify mechanisms by examining how each step causes the next. Why does participation in your activity lead to learning? Why does learning lead to behavior change? Why does behavior change lead to improved conditions? State assumptions explicitly. What must be true for this to work? Are you assuming participant motivation, external support, appropriate dosage, or other conditions make these assumptions visible? Writing a theory of change narrative requires clarity. Logical flow presents your theory in clear sequence. Start with the problem, move through intervention and mechanisms, and arrive at outcomes. The reader should follow your reasoning step by step. Causal language uses words that express causation. Phrases like leads to, results in, produces, and enables signal causal claims. Avoid vague associations. Be explicit about what causes what. Evidence references support your claims with research. When you claim that a certain approach produces outcomes, cite studies demonstrating this. Evidence strengthens your theory's credibility. Acknowledgement of complexity notes limitations and conditions. No theory works universally. Acknowledging when and for whom your approach works and what conditions are necessary demonstrates sophistication. Visual representations of theory of change complement narratives. Pathway diagrams show the causal chain visually. Boxes connected by arrows illustrate how one element leads to another. The visual makes the theory accessible and clear. Assumption boxes highlight key assumptions underlying the theory. Placing assumptions visibly in the diagram reminds readers that the theory depends on certain conditions being true. Evidence markers indicate where research supports claims. Symbols or notes showing which connections have research support versus which are hypothesized strengthen credibility. Multiple pathways show alternative routes to outcomes when they exist. Some participants may follow one pathway while others follow another. Complex theories may include multiple causal routes. Testing your theory of change before finalizing it strengthens your proposal. Internal consistency asks whether the logic holds together. Does each step follow from the previous one? Are there gaps or contradictions? Walk through the theory critically. Evidence alignment asks whether research supports your claims. For each causal link, is there evidence that relationship actually works? Where evidence is weak, acknowledge it. Plausibility check asks whether the theory is believable. Would a reasonable person agree that your intervention could produce these outcomes through these mechanisms? Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Stakeholder review solicits feedback from experts and participants. Do practitioners think your theory reflects how change actually happens? Do participants recognize their experience in your description? Several weaknesses commonly undermine theories of change. Missing steps leave gaps in the causal chain. If your theory jumps from activity to outcome without explaining intervening steps, the logic is incomplete. Every transition needs explanation. Unsupported claims make assertions without evidence. Claiming that your approach works without citing evidence weakens credibility. Either provide evidence or acknowledge the claim is hypothetical. Oversimplification ignores complexity and context. Real change processes are messy. Theories that present change as simple and linear may not reflect reality. Acknowledge complexity while maintaining clarity. Magic thinking expects outcomes without adequate mechanisms. Believing that providing information automatically changes behavior or that brief interventions produce lasting change reflects magical rather than realistic thinking. Outcomes require sufficient causes. Theory of change plays several roles in proposals. Explicit statement occurs when funders request theory of change directly. Some notices of funding opportunity ask for a theory of change section or diagram. When requested, provide a clear, evidence-based theory. Embedded logic means that even when not explicitly requested, theory underlies your project narrative. Your description of why the program works reflects your theory. Make this logic clear even without a dedicated section. Evaluation connection means theory guides what to measure. Your evaluation plan should test whether the causal chain works as theorized. Measure intermediate outcomes to test mechanisms, not just final outcomes. Credibility enhancement occurs because strong theory strengthens overall proposal. When reviewers understand why your program should work, they have more confidence in your design. Theory differentiates thoughtful proposals from superficial ones. Here is a practical exercise to apply what you have learned. Step 1. Write your ultimate outcome in one sentence. What is the final change you want to see? Be specific about who changes and how. Step 2. List 3 to 5 steps required to achieve that outcome. Working backward from the outcome, what must happen first? What changes lead to what other changes? Step 3. Write an if-then statement connecting each step to the next. If participants experience X, then they will develop Y. If they develop Y, then they will do Z. Make causation explicit. Step 4. Identify one piece of evidence supporting each connection. For each if-then statement, what research or experience suggests this relationship holds. Note where evidence is strong and where it is weak. Let us summarize the key points from this lesson. Theory of change explains why and how programs produce outcomes. It provides the causal reasoning underlying your logic model, moving beyond what happens to why it happens. If-then logic makes causal assumptions explicit. Stating your theory in conditional terms clarifies the relationships you propose and opens them to examination and testing. Evidence support strengthens theory with research. Citing studies that demonstrate your proposed relationships work increases credibility and confidence in your program design. In our next lesson, we will explore assumptions and external factors. These are the conditions that must exist for your theory of change to work and the contextual influences that affect program success. Understanding these elements completes your logic model framework.